This episode of Tales from Astlantis is brought to you by Astlantis Premium. Don't you just hate having your favorite podcast interrupted by ads like this? Well, dear listener, you're in luck. Because starting at just $3 a month, you can support independent Chicano media and receive ad-free episodes, premium episodes, bonus content, and access to our Discord server. Just visit talesfromastlantis.com and click Go Premium, or follow the link in the show notes. And now, on with the show.
You must excuse me. I've grown quite weary.
This hasn't been easy, I know. But you've learned a lesson. A lesson in honesty. Honesty to yourself and honesty to others. That lesson will stand you in good stead all your life.
I think we've all learned a good lesson. I've always heard that honesty is the best policy. Now I'm catching on to why that's so, and why that's so, and why that's so.
Greetings, dear listeners, and welcome to Tales from Astlantis, where we take you on a journey through Chicano, Mexicano, and Mesoamerican history and archaeology, and we help combat the spread of disinformation about these very topics. We are your hosts, Kurly Tlapoyawa.
And Ruben Arellano Tlacatecat.
What is up, man? How you doing?
I'm doing great. Just soaking in the beginning of the fall weather. Beautiful,
Nice.
beautiful
Is it-
weather. I mean,
Is it finally cooling down?
It's finally, cool in the low 90s, so that's pretty cool for us over here at this time
For
of year.
Texas.
It's still,
Yeah.
for Texas.
I remember.
It's still pretty hot, but we're getting there. We're slowly crawling our way into fall.
Did you guys get those breed of mosquito that's been coming
Oh
up?
man, I'm not sure.
There's we've been getting them here bad, and apparently it's because of that fake global warming. It's
Right.
It's warmer longer, and so these
Yeah.
mosquitoes usually don't make it this far north at this time of year.
Where are they from?
They're from Mexico, so they're taking the jobs of all the
Oh.
American mosquitoes.
Damn it! Of course.
Those little bloodsuckers.
I was going to say, you may not like to hear it, but we've been having a heat wave here, and it's been mid-90s. That's what counts as the heat wave here in Oakland. Yeah.
Well, I just read that they had their first documented cases of dengue fever in San Diego.
Oh,
As a
really?
result of these mosquitoes coming up.
Wow.
So, but luckily, climate change is a hoax. They should let everybody in the South know that right now,
Right.
as they're about to be freaking obliterated by this. What is it? It's like a category
Another
5
one. Yeah.
in a row. Yeah, it's pretty horrendous.
Wait, is this like the second one or the third one? Which one? I'm losing track.
It might be the third. I thought there were 2 before this, but at this point, who knows?
Yeah. I saw a photo of it from space from us, and it was it looked like it looked like from those horrible like environmental change movies from a few years ago. But now it's
Yeah.
I've
But
been
it's
hearing,
not CGI this time.
yeah.
I've been hearing people,
unfortunately.
saying, "Oh, that's what Florida gets for whatever." Like they make it all political, and it's like thinking back to like Hurricane Katrina, right? When that occurred, or other disasters that have occurred, like in California, where you're from. And how a lot of conservative politicos and like especially like religious pundits, they get on their little pedestal and then they start talking about, oh yeah, California is suffering the wrath of God because of their liberal loose agendas or whatever. And like I wonder what these people are saying about Florida. I mean, because Florida tends to be pretty conservative.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I'll tell you what they're saying about Florida. Dr. Tlacatecat, apparently this is happening to Florida as a result of the Biden administration controlling the weather. I'm not even bullshitting you.
Right, yes, of course.
And
I forgot
that
about
this is
that.
a direct weather
I did
attack.
get the memo. I did get the memo.
Yeah, but what they don't know is that the blood offerings I made to Tlaloc were successful.
There you go.
And the old gods have returned, and Florida's
have
paying the
returned.
price.
Finally.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
Tlaloc.
Well,
So for our listeners out there who are very astute, they might realize that there's a third voice with us for this very special episode of Tales from Astlantis. We are joined by the one, the only Scott Russell Duncan. And Scott, if I may, I'm going to read your bio from your website.
Oh, sure.
It says that Mr. Duncan is a Chicano writer, senior editor at Somos en Escrito literary magazine. And press.
That's actually an old one. That's the old one.
Oh, really?
Oh, that's an old
Yeah.
bio.
Oh, no,
How many
it's the
bios
old
do you
bio.
have?
I moved.
Well, where are you now?
I'm starting a new press called Maiz Poppin' Press with some other folks, and
Oh,
hopefully it'll
damn.
launch next year.
Nice.
He's popping.
That's a
I like the
great
sound
name.
of that.
Yeah, that's a great name. You were the director of Palabras del Pueblo. Is that still true?
That's still true. It's
A
going on
writing
right now.
workshop for La Raza. In 2016, his story, How My Hide Got Color, won San Francisco Litquake's short story contest. His nonfiction piece, Mexican American Psycho is in Your Dreams, won first place in the 2019 Solstice Literary Magazine annual literary contest. And he is at work on a collection of short stories called Plurality. His newest novel is called Old California Strikes Back, and that was put out recently, right? Just like last month? Or
It's about to come out on the 15th.
okay, so this month.
Yeah.
Awesome.
This month, yeah.
And that's
Is that-
coming
is
out
that a-
through Flower Song Press.
Flower Song Press, yeah.
Is that a reference to Star Wars?
No, I think it was a date we just pulled out of a hat, to be honest.
Okay.
Oh, I mean the title,
The
yeah,
title, yeah.
of course. I thought you meant the date.
No. I'm like, wait.
I thought you knew about some secret Star Wars date I didn't know about.
I'm not like a Star Wars nerd or anything, but hey,
Yeah.
you know, I'll take it. So I've been pronouncing in my mind. I pronounce your name as Scott Russell Duncan for some reason.
I've heard that plenty of times. Yeah. People come down asking me where I'm from. Where's the Duncan name from?
Right. Is
Yeah.
that French?
Just make
Yeah.
shit up, man.
I had to make stuff. Actually, I had to make stuff up as a child. I mean, honestly, nobody knew what I was growing up because my white friends wouldn't let me inside their house.
Wow.
Their parents, right? Like they had the no Mexican allowed rule, and
They had the sign on the door. It said no Mexicans.
pretty much. It was like take off your shoes and no Mexicans.
No
And-
beaners in here.
Yeah, basically. And so for some people, I was Filipino. For some reason, Filipinos.
What?
Some people I was Italian, and some people were I forget. I had all different stuff. Yeah, like all around. I couldn't remember.
So you
I
could have
couldn't keep
played
it straight.
Richie. I'm taking
I'm sorry.
Richie
Oh,
Valens.
Rich. Yeah, I could have played Richie exactly. I would Richie. Yeah, the Lou Diamond Phillips didn't
Right.
surprise me when
So
they're remaking that. You know.
yeah, I was just about to say they're
Hey, wait,
remaking-
aren't they remaking? Yeah, you're right. They're
Alamba.
remaking it. Why? Why are they doing that?
I don't know. Apparently, Luis Valdez isn't involved. Is that, if I read correctly, if I'm misremembering, I don't know, but I seem to remember seeing that Luis Valdez wasn't very happy about it.
Scott, what do you say? I mean, you're over there.
I've been making jokes about it, just like, like Richie's gonna ask Bob, like, I want to know about like my heritage and the cultura. Take me to Latinx.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And all the Chicanos in it are going to be played by gender fluid Puerto Ricans.
Yeah, pretty much.
This is the new the remake of La Bamba for the new age, folks. La Bombex.
Bombex. Dang,
That's it.
you're on the roll tonight, Carl. Man.
Yeah.
I'm only one beer deep too.
Speaking of beers, hold my beer.
So how are things? You live in Oakland.
Live in Oakland,
correct?
longest place I lived in my entire life.
How long have you been there?
Like 2007.
Oh yeah, that is a long time.
A bit of a stretch.
So your new book, Old California Strikes Back. I think I'm like 3/4 of the way through it. I'm not done with
Okay.
it yet, but I got to tell you, man, it's really good. It's really entertaining, and it's very original. Like I
It
really
does draw
like
you
it.
in. I like it. At first, I was like, "Who's Ramona and why is she so prominent in this book?" But I finally realized, oh, okay, I
Yeah.
get it now.
Yeah, unfortunately, Ramona's prominent in California. Yeah, I grew up in a town called Ramona. Yeah, it took over. That's how they took the story over, really. That's why I wrote an essay kind of about the research I did for the book, and I called it "Why California Looks Like Taco Bell." It basically answers Ramona, right?
Okay.
I mean, yeah, everywhere you go is like the dentist, red tile, barreled root, you know, and it's all fake, right? Even the stuff even the stuff you show up to and they say it's historic,
right?
all that stuff
fantasy.
was it's fantasy. It was rubble when the U.S. showed up, right?
Right.
And they had and they even displaced more Indians. They displaced more Indians because of this fantasy about this paternalistic relationship with Indians. Because like they showed up and like, well, you're still there and there's rubble. Get the hell out of here and let's rebuild it for you know, some white people from the East Coast, you know.
Right.
And wasn't that like the exact opposite of the intention that the author had of the book?
Yeah, Helen Hunt Jackson, like, I mean, it's a bit problematic, right? But like but she's preferable. In 1880 she wrote or perhaps a little bit before that, she wrote a essay called Crime of the Century. I forget, it's been a while since I read it, but like it's something Dishonor of the Century, something like this, about trying to advocate because she got a grant to go to California and like because she lost all her family, she started taking up native advocacy, right? And she heard about the Temecula displacement, which of course that was, you know, that's a horrible thing. There are a lot of stuff going down between, you know, the invasion in 1870 to 1880, right? But she goes there, she travels all around Southern California. She can't figure out why most tribally affiliated people won't talk to her when she has a big hat with an owl on it, which, symbolizes death to quite a lot of native folk.
Right.
And so what she did was stay with all the Californios. You know, they were like, kind of pissed off about everything, still having parties, kind of scared about, and then also scared about losing their land. And they're like, they kind of have the same internalized stuff there that they did in New Mexico. You know, I'm also New Mexico, my grandfather's side, where they're like, by the way, I'm Spanish. You know, I'm the most Spaniard ever live. Right? Don't take my land. Don't sue me because I can't. You know,
I read that part about your grandpa and how he claimed to be Spanish.
That was, yeah. And so,
I'm like, okay.
Yeah, it's the same. Yeah, it's still around and kicking. I kind of love, I really love the Genealogy Society, Hispanic Genealogy Society, but one part I belong to it because on the forums and stuff, you always come across people finding out they 23andMe, right? And it's like, it's not possible. How am I mostly native? How am I?
It's always shocking to these folks. I just gave a talk at one of these organizations here in Texas a few days ago, the theme 5 years ago when I spoke before COVID, the theme was because it was 2019, and so they were kind of commemorating the landing of Cortez in Mexico, and so like 500 years of Cortez as our grandfather, whatever it was, the title. I'm like, wow. And so I did a presentation to sort of contest that. I said, well, if Cortez is my grandfather, how come he wasn't Coahuiltecan? You know, so that was the title of my presentation. And so this time around, it was something similar to that effect again about celebrating our Spanish, indigenous, mestizo, all this stuff. And I'm like, And so I decided to go a different way. I'm like, okay, so since these people are obsessed with Spain, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show them how the Spanish also obliterated another group of indigenous people off of the coast of Africa, the Guanches from the Canary Islands. Because, here in Texas, there's this whole population in Central Texas and San Antonio specifically that are so proud of their Canary Islander heritage because they were the people that sort of populated that area. And I'm like, did you know, by the way, the Spanish... check this out. And I drove the point home at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. By the end, people were just looking at me like, okay, thank you very much, sir.
Yeah. Well, you know what, Ruben? This is why nobody likes us.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. I mean, I call it the your Spanish conquistador grandpa left to get cigarettes and he hasn't come back yet,
Yeah.
I don't really get it, honestly. I mean, my identity has been spinning top and strange and all that, because people tell me one thing, other thing growing up, or they want to launch stuff at me saying, to get racism for being native, or racism for being like Mexican, or racism for being like coconut. But like, I got a white father, and so I don't quite understand. They're lionizing this Spanish ancestor from 400 years ago,
Right. Mm-hmm. I know. It's incredible.
And there's not like a weird test, like I think about, my grandmother, like being our native ties to a tribal ties was like a secret. She didn't want us to get enrolled. She didn't want that, that's like old school Chicano. It's like, it was, it's her generation was before, obviously, before the 60s and all that and the movement. And so it's like you couldn't get her to talk about it too much, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even though like my mother and uncles and aunts and whatnot, they would go visit family in the reservation and whatnot. I don't know anything about them, or and yeah, it's strange. It's strange. It's just really odd, like how much. How, like, also, what's the other thing? Like, you get cautioned too. Like, I went to this conference and it's kind of churning my stomach because it's supposed to be from this Eurocentric label of Latino, and they say connecting to ancient heritages, of Apaches and Pueblo, whoever, just for example, like, but it was like Mayans, whoever.
Yeah, typical Latins.
But yeah, but it's like, don't say that you're native, right? You're not native, but and they caution me. I'm like, first off, you don't know my story. Why are you cautioning me? I could be enrolled. Exactly. You don't know. B, it's like you're writing upon our literature, and you're making it. You are 1,000% shoehorning it into a colonial narrative, into its like from an outlook.
And they're assuming your identity too. Like they look at you and they're making already all these assumptions about who you are, your identity, who you can and cannot be, what you can and call yourself and cannot call yourself. I'm like, wait a minute. Like, hold on. Like, who are you, first of all?
Yeah. Yeah. They sound like fucking cops is what they sound like. It's like, just don't be a cop. How about that?
Show me your papers.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's one reason I haven't changed.
Right?
Yeah, like my name is like very Northern European. A lot of people get like upset. I don't take it from people with Southern European names, right? But just like my ID gets checked all the time, right? Like I'm not supposed to belong to this name, and it's just a little bit odd. So for me, I'm kind of like throwing it into people's faces that yes, my name is Scott Russell Duncan.
Right.
Yeah, it's just like the U.S. has been around here for since 1846, at least, and they even before that, because a lot of American families actually came to California and kind of married in, and they caused trouble whenever the invasion happened, of course. But there wasn't so the contact between these cultures has kind of been going on for a while.
And so this is kind of what informs your work, right? I mean, your current body of work. Old California Strikes Back. It kind of is drawing on these themes that have played out throughout your entire life, and your connections with family, and the place you grew up in, and the way that society sort of the way you perceive it and how people perceive you, right?
We'll be back after a quick break.
Have you picked up your Mexica calendar for the year 12 Flint? Or how about a paperback copy of The Four Disagreements? Just visit talesfromastlantis.com for all the latest merchandise and show some love for your favorite podcast. That's talesfromastlantis.com for all the latest merchandise. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, it affects me every day, to be honest. Like every day, like if somebody says, like, it's strange that, like someone will say I look so indigenous one day, like I hear it, or, whether they mean it good or bad, I kind of sigh because the next week I'm going to hear, like, I look so Mexican, right? Or I don't look Mexican. Or I'm going to hear how white I look the week after that. It sounds, how things happen in threes sometimes. So if I hear one thing, I'll hear the other thing next week. Like, I don't look Mexican at all. I don't look native at all. I don't look white at all. It's really odd,
So you take the best of three? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, it's kind of it's a joke. It's like, it's part of, it's the way the U.S. has always written about Mexicans, right, and indigenous has overlapped quite with it, right, about every indigenous people, but they used it because it's like if we're Latinxes, if we're Spanish or we're Hispanic, that means we have no claims to land. We have, like our culture is not a native culture, and so we're
eternal immigrants.
Yeah, and
with no history here.
I call it existential attack upon our identity because, like I was on this panel once and it was kind of early, and so I wasn't exactly playing the game, if you know what I'm saying. I was a little too tired, and they kept on saying, as an immigrant population, I'm like, hey, hang on a second, wait a second, we're all not immigrants because, like, A, like we're from this continent, and B, the U.S. crossed us, right? And if you're going to be being this kind of inclusive of Chicanos into this terminology, you're going to have to respect that we're all not, you can't label us all like this, you know?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it, like you're saying, like it goes, like I grew up in Southern California and in North Texas, right, in Dallas. And grew up in a town called Ramona near San Diego. And my family's from LA, and they were, you know, they were both in the indigenous people there, the people that, you know, I even come from people aren't like this, but I also come from a mission guard that put down a revolt, right? That it was against some Luiseño people. I'm also, you know, part Luiseño, right? So that's the same story in New Mexico a lot. We come across in pretty much all of the colonial stories like this. And it's just strange that when I'm walking around town, people when, you know, hillbillies would throw the urine jugs at me, which, you know, as I was writing this book, it became more and more like I'm remembering, like, this happened all the time. I totally normalized it.
I hate
it's
when
not
that
like
happens.
Yeah, it happened all the time. And I was a kid, you know, and they're like, go the fuck back to Mexico. If I'm near the Barona reservation, they would assume I'm native. And so they're like, you know, a Barona, which, you know, I'm not part of them, but like they would make, they would do like hoo, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and throw the urine jug, you know, and so
damn,
where are they getting all these urine jugs from?
Right?
Is there is that a common thing in California?
Are
you
you
just piss in jugs?
you may not be from a rural place, you know. If you're in your pickup, you know, you're driving, I don't know, drunk driving up the mountain.
They hold on to it. Like I've done that before when, you know, a long time ago on a long trip. Well, you don't
you don't
that
keep
thing.
it.
Well, you don't keep it. You find a Mexican child to throw it at, or Indian child.
Well, here we call it trucker tea. As archaeologists will be doing survey on the side of roads sometimes, and I'll always tell the new people on the crew, like, stay away from the trucker tea, and they're like, "What's that?" I'm like, "You'll know when you see it."
Yes,
it's like the Mountain Dew, right?
So the book, I really like the way it's written because, I mean, it's got really funny parts, but it's not written like as a comedy, right? It's very straightforward, and it goes back and forth between this like autobiographical stuff and then this fantasy stuff, and like it starts getting hard for me to determine, like, well, is he exaggerating here, or did this happen, or what's the real part and what's the fake part? And honestly, man, I felt like and this is meant as a compliment. I don't know how other people feel about this, but it felt like I was reading like a Chicano Hunter S. Thompson at times. And he's one of my favorite writers. So that's meant as a compliment. But
well, I like Brown Buffalo because I keep it real. I'm just joking.
yeah, I'm more of a Oscar Zeta Costa kind of guy.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I like Hunter S. Thompson as well. But yeah, I mean, it goes into one thing because it's like who we are. It's kind of a fantasy, right? And like what, and I did quite a lot of research for this. You may not even get that from the book because like I started looking more and more, and I hit against this Spanish California like mission fantasy, right? That Zorros and all these other things that they created has been going on since 1880. And it's all for tourists. It's all to divorce us from who we are. It's to whitewash us literally. And it's all a fantasy. And it's a fantasy to think that people who come from across the ocean get to say if we're native here or not. But like the U.S. started genocide right when they came. You know, they started like displacing people, hunting people. They literally hunted people. And that's the Northern California genocide. Only a few years ago did actually see like any kind of commemoration at the Oakland Museum over here about it. But they also enslaved Native people, like with the what do you call them, vagrancy laws in LA, and they readily took up, there's, and we look today who's out there in the field doing all the work, who's in the factories. It's still brown folks, it's still indigenous people, along with some other people, marginalized folks, but and everyone's very much okay with us not getting paid as much, for hard labor and doing the worst jobs. And so it's and then you also see, growing up in San Diego, you see a lot of migrant workers and what people say about it, and just how normal they try to normalize like this kind of trash talk against Mexicans, trash talk about, like at least back then before NAFTA, it was a lot of young farm boys from like, some like neighboring states for the most part, at least back then, right? And they did all the work, in the semi-rural area, and it's just they were sending most of the money they got back home to support their families. And it was just disgusting how everyone treated them and how dehumanized, like, small town people bragging, older guys bragging about, I remember one in particular just bragging about like he was like hurling batteries at a guy,
God damn.
and robbing their camps, robbing camps of like really poor people, right? And beating them up and doing all sorts of stuff. It's who is it okay to do this to? They got to dehumanize us and them, and we're virtually the same, to excuse like the how the society exploits people, and also reinforce. It goes on with these stories they tell, right? Like who they are, and it makes, you watch Star Trek. I'm a nerd. I watch Star Trek and all this stuff, and I always wondering, like, so, like I write in the book, like Captain Kirk's beating up the Gorn by Vasquez Rocks. That's where a Chicano folk hero was. That's when, like, where amongst folk heroes, California wasn't nearly as good as Texas, right? As far as like saying things that actually were resistive. Tiburcio Vasquez got pretty close, after the fact, and maybe he didn't kill anybody, maybe he did, but he did hang out with some. Look up one of his gang members. He went to San Quentin. Hardest looking Mexican on the ever been in entire life. Makes Danny Trejo look like a kitten. I mean, like he's
Man, that's saying something.
Yeah, I mean, this guy, like his San Quentin prison. I can't remember the guy's name offhand, but like Tiburcio Vasquez. Well, he that's his. But he might have not shot anyone. Yeah. He escaped San Quentin. He went all around California. He was celebrated by all the Californios because he danced, he sang, he did poems. And it's just strange. I mean, I went to all these places, and he might have he visited my family because it's very common for Mexican families to put him up because even though he was on the run, he only robbed Americans.
Was he before or after Murrieta?
He was after. And that's the other thing. Yeah, Murrieta's a big character in my book. It's just he was just the easy.
Well, part of him is.
Yeah, part of him is, like I said. He's just a very easy symbol because our fragmented culture, right? Our fragmented history, our fragmented everything, and you want to know more, and you also you're not quite getting all the answers you want, right? Because we're occupied, defeated, we don't tell the story, and it's like, and even before this current colonization, there was another colonization that mixed all these people, moved all these people, enslaved people, and that makes it even more like what's the word, like confusing, right? And so Murrieta's in it, and on top of it there's like the figure of Ramona that's like the fantasy. She's literally like, she's supposed to be half California native and half Scottish, right? But she's still this fantasy Mexican, right? She's still like she's damned by the Spanish family, right, that raises her by adoption. But she's still kind of the fantasy, the American of the Mexican kind of mix, how they've always portrayed us as being like mixed like this. So they can use both, if they don't want us to be native, they can flip flop, right? As you guys
and that's the novel, right? That's kind of the story behind the novel.
Yeah, that's pretty. And throw in we're a product of like social forces. I'm a product, I'm around because of wars and stuff like that. My parents met because my dad, left Texas to go to Vietnam, was on leave, and the same thing. Like my grandpa would probably never have left New Mexico, right? Like he's from a very rural place called Mora.
Get out of here!
What?
Yeah, what's his last name?
Fernandez.
Really? My wife's from
Any
Mora.
Pachecos? So, if she knows any Pachecos or Wells, Mondragons, I think Garcias.
It's
I'm
a small
sure.
community.
Yeah. It's a very. I don't know if you've been to Mora, but it's not a thriving mega metropolis by any stretch.
No, it's not.
It's really beautiful up there, and everybody
is.
knows everybody. So, well, you'd mentioned watching Star Trek, and one of my favorite parts of the book that I've read so far is when you talk about your mom taking you to see The Wrath of Khan, and how you talk about this movie can be viewed through a Chicano lens because Khan is played by Montalban.
Montalban,
right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you go into how Spock as a half breed, right? He has to attain his full humanity by dying and showing that
that's what we're for, right?
yeah, exactly. And it really struck a chord with me, man. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because it's actually a sad story.
Yeah, I mean, I love Wrath of Khan, and I mean, obviously, my book has to deal with like my, obviously horrible relationship with my mother as well, right? And uh, she was abusive, and she was, I actually toned it down for the book. So when hopefully my family hear this, know that.
Damn.
Man.
But like out of the blue, one time, like, because she would be kind of like, saying, Scotty, you're a fucking stupid space TV show. You're gonna turn this shit off, all that kind of thing. All of a sudden, let's go see Star Trek. Like, this is a trap.
What?
This is a trap, right?
Yeah.
I expected something's wrong with the movie, something's wrong with it, but I went. But she was actually, that's the only thing I can think of before the age of 5 that was like nice, like mother-son time, just even a little bit. And like we went to see this, and to me, it's like that movie is completely the fear of the internal of the empire and how the internal what do you call it? The internal empire, right? I've done the internal other, right? Because they got this, they had this beef with other powers that's going on, Klingons, whatnot, Russians. It was during the 80s. And but what about the marginalized folks? There's Chekhov, the communist. Then there's the African American. I forget his name, but he's captain. He was Chekhov's captain. But Khan captures them both and puts a little like earbug into them. So he got into their minds, right? And so like you have marginalized people under the doctrine of socialism, and under like it's basically brown people getting together, black, brown, and socialism getting together, or Khan, and and they often have this. What was it? The Raza Kosminka is something that turned out it's kind of a racist thing and strange, but people still talk about it. And but still, this kind of talk about eugenics and whatnot that's around Khan, they still stick on it. They're still, when you saw like not to mix things, Avatar, the whole thing about the fear of the body, brown body was coming out pretty strong in that. Same thing with Khan. He's super strong, even though, Montalban's actually Spanish, but still, like a little confusion will happen. It's fine with that. But so he talks about Chicano stuff. Like, I was a prince 100 years ago, all these things like that, all the old Chicano, like land grants.
Yo soy Joaquin.
Yeah. And so it's like, and then he's like, he played Montalban played the Latin lover, and he was always this kind of stereotype. Like he's really passionate, and he can't let anything go, right? He could have just gone. He had a starship, and he could have gone.
And he also had a love boat too, if I remember correctly.
No, he had a fantasy island.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah,
I'm getting my shows mixed up. It was the fantasy island. That's right, not the love boat. God damn it.
Yeah. But so I'm watching this movie, and I was like, why did she take me to this? Why was she nice there? And kind of like, because like, to be a little bit contrived about it, I have to admit, but it's still like, how are we in society is basically how, like, Khan, he's a monster. Like we're a monster. We're the monster in all, as Native people, as in all these TV shows, right? And a little forward with it sometimes, but like Kirk fighting the Gorn by Vasquez Rocks. How is that an alien landscape if one of our Chicano heroes were there, and is also in part of this native place here? Like, so I think it has to boil down to ritual. He had to ritualize through narrative of who you are, and you being the Anglo-American. They're the ones that are able to have dominated the land, and they get anxiety over it, because if there gets to be too many marginalized folks, you got to do something, right? As we're kind of seeing, right? Like you got to get rid of them. There's like too many to like you kind of wonder, like, why are they against migrant workers when they exploit them? It's because there's too many around, and that you don't want it to flip over, and you can't exploit them anymore. So you got to get rid of them so they're manageable. But it's kind of, and so it's
that fear of the slave revolt still, right?
Fear, fear of the slave revolt, Indian tack, all that kind of same stuff.
And this othering of Mexicans, literature. I mean, we saw that as recently as Trump with his bullshit. They're rapists, they're this, they're that. We're always like the fallback bad guys in this country. We make
banditos.
We make the easy bad guys. And the one thing, I'm pretty sure you didn't mention it, but Khan, it's a Maya word for serpent.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Mhm.
I need to do an edit.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, is that what they're referencing in the Khan? Because it has the
No,
H in
they're
it,
probably
right?
talking about Genghis
Genghis
Khan or
Khan.
Yeah,
something.
he's supposed to be from India, and
But still, that
yeah.
similarity there is kind of like you could do something. You could play with that, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And then how in the serpent in Mesoamerican societies is actually a bringer of knowledge, whereas the white
Genghis
people
Khan is the bringer of death and
is-
destruction.
Yeah. Well, actually, there was a big rattlesnake that lived across the street from me as a kid. I appreciated him because he would rattle each time he got, like down the trail.
Yeah.
But it was a jogging trail, so people are always freaking out, like screaming. I'm just walking by, and like he's letting you know he's there.
Right.
Like,
Yeah,
why
yeah,
would
yeah,
you
he's
Never
stop?
get close, fool.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you
okay.
started writing this book, did you have like a set in your mind? Here's the beginning, the middle, and the end, or did you just have like a loose outline, or did you just start writing and say like, well, let's just see where this takes me?
I would write, and then I would do research, and it took me quite some time, and I didn't think it would. Right? I really thought it would be like, I wanted a book that would answer, because there's always people people would demand where I'm from, strangely, like because I have a Northern European name, and I'm brown for anyone who can't see, but I stay inside, so maybe I'm a little browner, like I'm kind of pale, but like people would say, so where, like they would do this thing. I mean, I can't remember. I put in the book. It's been a while, but like they would say, so where's your family from? I'd be like L.A. Right. So, but when they come, like, but where were you born?
Where are they
L.A. Where's your
from?
family? L.A. Yeah. And then like, when did you come from Mexico? I didn't. It's like, when did you come? I'm saying, when did they come from Mexico? They didn't.
Yeah.
And
Mexico came from us, bitch.
yeah, exactly. And so people get upset. And yeah, and so I had some certain notion. I wanted to end all the questions, and it did transform me. It put me more on decolonizing path. And I would say the book went from A to B, and I'm trying to be C to D these days, right? And like I was using terms when I started out, like mestizo and all that kind of stuff. There might be a few. I wanted to have a few in the beginning, in particular, and now I'm just not. I'm more. More read upon it, more thought upon it, and like you look and see, why am I despised in society other than my personality and whatnot? And you kind of see it's because you're indigenous, you're brown, and so it kind of winds up in a certain place. And so I would go, and also I was trying to write. I really like flash fiction and short stories, and that's my kind of preferred form. And I was kind of, how can I write something that could be composed of these things and also go and be thematically, which I figured it helped out thematically because it was it could be like different pieces of a whole, like fragmentation is definitely part of it. I was also looking at, of course, hopscotch, what's in Spanish, Rayula, and by, what's his name?
Is this Julio Cortázar?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I kind of like that. It's kind of literary, choose your own adventure. And I thought that kind of lent to the fragmentation. And I actually did travel California. And the title is actually in reference to the first Hollywood movie, which is Old California, which is part of the fantasy about Spanish California, and by the guy D.W. Griffith. That's his name.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
He did was it Birth of a Nation, about the Klan. But yeah, the Old California is just as racist. Really, it's just as racist. It's trying to divorce us from who we are. It was trying to promote a fantasy about like a horrible genocide. It's just. But it's the first Hollywood movie, and it's just a strange thing. I mean, also some of my family names all around Southern California, like Verdugo. And I remember I was at some online event, and it was a bunch of like, there's some native professors and whatnot, and someone mentioned Verdugo meant executioner, and I'll write it down for their little poetry later. I was like, wait a second, that's just the name. Hang on a second, that has nothing to do. If it's called Smith, it doesn't mean they're doing Smith, I mean, not to offend the guy, but you know what I'm saying. Like,
Verdugo means executioner.
He has an old word for executioner. It'd be like if your name was John Killer or something like that, or John Hood.
John Wick, something. You mean?
John Wick. Yeah.
that fool's a killer.
Yeah, and well, I basically wrote. What I basically decided was, like to really to have the structure around the narrative of the the travel story, right? Because it's kind of like, the idea of self-travel, but also it's all tied with commercialism and commodification of history and people. The stuff I found was so weird. Like it literally was a thing about Mission Indians Native people making baskets, and it was like Pokemon. Like you're supposed to come to drive out to California and go from like one place to the other, collecting their baskets.
And
it's like
to
connect with the
collect the
sublime.
spoons and stuff, right? Like you gotta collect.
Yeah, it was really odd. And they also would come to like Mexican like ranch houses in the middle of nowhere. They're supposed to have been where Ramona stayed, and they would like run in, steal everything, or just like start sitting on chairs, and or then like run out and like steal, or But a lot of times they would run in, start stealing stuff, and then say like, you're supposed to feed us now, aren't you? And this is and then they'd want to have like they expected, because the book showed them like feeding people
Mexican hospitality.
It showed them Mexican hospitality. And I think I wrote something about like Helen Hunt Jackson. She wrote about this. It must have been the first time she met a Mexican, because it's all Mexican stuff she's writing about, ranch life and stuff like that. Right. And so people would literally come across, and it would be, I forget some of the families in particular, they would show up and really just like mess up with your stuff. And like, they'd have like, all of a sudden like 50, 100 people over, like white people, right? Trying to like wanting them to stay, like, put me up, put me up, like feed
what
me.
Is this, an Airbnb or something?
Yeah, like all of a sudden, and I don't want to tell you, like, there was like, not everybody had a big ranch, obviously. There was a lot of poor people, poor Californios, poor whatever, right? And a lot of Native people started saying they were Mexican because they didn't want to get hunted, or they want to get robbed, and all the other stuff like gringo put in slavery. And so the amount of people having houses and land and was on a steady decline, and so before everyone got kind of moved to like the barrio and stuff like that. And so it's just a little funny, like they're going to people that have little and demanding.
I think it's interesting, the parallels that you just pointed out with the Mission Indians in California and the Mission Indians here in Texas. It's a very similar story, because after Texas independence, a lot of the indigenous people, like the Coahuiltecans, a lot of the Apache, some Karankawas and others, they were given a choice. Either you get out of Texas, or we're going to come after you. We're going to kill you if you stay within the boundaries of Texas. And so a lot of natives to the north of Austin decided to go to Oklahoma, the Indian Territory. So like the Caddo, the Tonkawa, the Wichita. So those folks went to Oklahoma, but the people who stayed in Texas were in South Texas, people like Coahuiltecos and Karankawas. And so they decided to pass as Mexicans because they wanted to stay in their homeland. Right.
That's
and
what
so
a lot
now,
of people did in California.
Yeah. And so there's a similarity between what would happen to them back then and how they're beginning to reclaim their indigeneity and their place among fellow Native American peoples. And I was just on a panel this weekend, or actually yesterday, for Indigenous Peoples Day, and we had this same discussion about Coahuiltecan identity and the difference between state recognized and non-federally recognized tribes, and what comes with the territory in terms of like being federally recognized as opposed to not being. And so one of the things that I was talking on is that for us as Coahuiltecos, those of us that still maintain that identity, we don't really care to have federal recognition. There are some that do. I'm not speaking for all Coahuiltecans, but for the most part, like the ones that I know don't really care for that. But what does matter is having the ability to carry on our medicine meetings, our traditions legally without any repercussions, without being arrested for being in ceremony and things like that. And also because we'd like to repatriate the remains of our ancestors that are found here in Texas. And so if you're not federally recognized, then there's really no way. You have very limited recourse to be able to do that. And so there are some people within the Coahuiltecan community who are beginning to have second thoughts about, becoming federally recognized, BIA Indians, just to have those benefits, to be able to, do your traditions without fear and repercussions of being arrested and fined or even thrown in jail, or also as well being able to claim the remains of your ancestors and rebury them. And so, I mean, I'm sure it plays out a little different in California, but I mean, I see a lot of kind of like
Yeah, it's a lot of the same stuff. I think you also, you want to be, I imagine you also want to be in charge of your narrative, of your own narratives and your own culture,
Right.
right? Because and one thing I kind of noticed, pretty much, certain populations have outsiders feel more than 1,000% to say who is authentic, who is not, and that's something that happened to me all my life. And I also, writing this book, I came across there does need to be like a discussion amongst Native people and the people that are like Mexican people, right? Because particularly in this land, because we're double colonized. And because I come across like the story of like one of my ancestors, like I said, was a mission guard. Even though I'm partly Luiseño Saboba, he put down a revolt by the Tongva, right? Even though it wasn't the horrible bloody one that you often come across, as far as we know, right? Because like the Spanish were writing the narrative, but it was one of the figures that is becoming larger, at least for like many Chicanos in LA and other Native folks. It's like of Toparina. She was the leader, and I really admire her story and her strength. And she's someone that I look to, like, hey, we don't need to take it. We don't need to. We can stand up and we can try to be proud of who we are. All those kind of things are good from figures. But
so was this rebellion that was put down? It was put down by one indigenous group against a different indigenous group, right?
No, it was in a Spanish mission. It's pretty close to where my mother grew up, which is a little funny. And I think my cousins actually went there for their Boy Scout badge, whatever. But it was the San Gabriel Archangel, and they basically the Spaniards were saying, and also you gotta say, kind of like saying the Anglos when everyone goes to Iraq, maybe, because it's like, there's different kinds of people there, obviously from Mexico that went to California, and also Native people that got decimated in Baja California, and that were supposed to be like good examples of what could happen to you, which is like, they can destroy your language, your culture, and your physical well-being. But they were there. And so basically they forbid the funeral dances, and a child had died and they wanted to do a Native Tongva dance. And particularly my ancestor that I knew was there, he said no. And so a different corporal of the guard knew the Tongva language. And so he heard them over talking about Torperinas, getting everyone together, and they're going to kill all the priests and kill all the guards, right? And so he set up a little ambush. They disguised themselves as priests, and they stood on top of the. This is all like not that many people, by the way. It's like 30 people versus 60 people, or 50 or 40 people, something like that. And so basically it was put down, and they write out this long trial about of Torperina. All the men caved in and said, "Oh, I don't know why we went against the Spaniards. You treated us so great, right? The fathers were always the best to us." She's the only one who didn't cave in, and so they made her divorce her husband, and she had status. So she was she was a daughter of a chief, right, of a leader, and so they married her to a mission guard in Monterey, and that's where she died. And last thing they write about her is basically that she became a good Catholic woman, and she gets buried into on the there's no marker like that, a mass grave there, but like for me, I was writing the book, there's not too much reference to her, because I was thinking, because in the middle of it, I'm like, I want to kind of address this as far as like my own indigenous Californian connections, my own, I'm related to like war criminals, and people, not that this guy was the worst of the worst, but like other people like that. And I want to kind of have an internal dialogue, but it's like, I also want to kind of figure out how to do that. And I thought Toparina might kind of take over the book in a certain manner. Because I thought, well, let me put it this way. She deserves her own book. Yeah. Not this Ramona bullshit, not share space with this Ramona bullshit. Yeah. She deserves her own space. And so that's why anybody who might know them a little more California history, like, why didn't I talk more about Toparina? Because I respected Toparina not to share space with some fake nonsense that they throw.
Is that your next project?
Yeah, one of them. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to do it in a proper manner, if you know what I'm saying. Like,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So as a Chicano author, it's like, it's hard enough as it is to get books written and published and noticed and promoted. But I imagine you know, being a Chicano author, I mean, maybe if you sold out and you were like, well, I'm a Latinx, you know, author, and I'm part of this hip new Latinx movement, you might get a little bit more love. But when you come out specifically, like Ruben always says, you know, disrupt Latinidad by proudly using the word Chicano. And when you disrupt that Latinidad, it's like you're not playing by the rules anymore. And I imagine that makes it harder.
It does make it harder. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
No. Go ahead. I mean, you know where I was going with it.
Yeah, it makes it a lot harder. I mean, because you're not supposed to say anything, right? And also, as a Chicano author, you only exist during Hispanic Heritage Month. Like, you only exist. And a lot of, like, you know, I don't like a lot of people who think they're like, I don't know how to say it, like they can spit shine a turd or something like that. They want to call it Latine author month.
Latine. Have you seen this new one, Chicane?
Yeah, I kind of put that because people get upset because
every time Chicano, I read it in my mind, I read it as chicane, and I'm like,
Chicane.
This doesn't make any sense. Do you?
I put that now and then for academics. To be honest, I put that because as I left, like, there was a big issue at this former organization, which you guys had mentioned. I'm not going to mention again, about using any other. I typically use Chicano, but I don't want to be, non-inclusive. But then also know academics. If I don't want to hear a bunch of BS if I don't say Chicanex, I don't want to hear. So sometimes I say Chicane or Chicanex is for them. But also I don't know what the answer is either. That's what I don't know. I don't know what to do. But I hear a bunch of nonsense no matter what I use. But as far as the Latinx Latino people, it's not for us. It literally is meant. It melts away our concerns. You know, like we're not. And it makes us. It wants to regulate. Like, you know, John Leguizamo has this. I haven't seen it yet. You know, but has this thing coming out for.
Can you imagine John Leguizamo in your Chicano history? I can't.
Yeah, I know. And so basically,
I can't do it.
It's supposed to be kind of like a tourist headdress that you put on and say, "Oh, I recognize my indigenous ancestry," rather than being an indigenous person, rather than doing something about the environment, about all the other things, about the history, about the about the social issues, and it makes it harder. Yeah, being a Chicano makes it harder because people come at me because I speak like this. I got a white name, as they say, right? I'm a strange mixture of both very authentic Chicano experiences and very, like, non-authentic Chicano experiences, right? Like, I was born in East LA, right? But also grew up in a redneck town.
Hey, man, all Chicano experiences are authentic Chicano experiences.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
But also I would go to, like, my family's ranch in New Mexico, right? And so it's like, it's I had a white father, which makes it a little, different. But at the same time, like, I had to tell him growing up, you expect me to come to your house, you got to have some, like, hot sauce if you want me to eat your food.
Season your food, God damn it.
Season your food. I was like, literally, yeah, that was me as a teenager. I can't steal from you.
I mean,
any more food unless you season it.
It's like people haven't watched that documentary with that half Chicano, half white guy who goes to prison and needs a gang. What's it called?
Blood in, blood
in, blood out. Miklo, right?
Yeah, Miklos. Okay, I'll tell you. When that came on cable, like in the 90s, right? I was eating a sandwich. And I'm like, oh, what the hell is this stuff? I'll put on. All right. And I literally dropped the sandwich. Because that opening scene, I lived because my dad like hired some, like the scene is like Miklos' dad's like, they're working outside. And he's like, tell these Mexicans that they need to work harder or whatever it was. And he's like, why don't you tell them? Right. I literally lived that without the accent.
You're like, that's me. I feel
you felt seen. Yeah.
I never ever seen any kind of like that, like any kind of that kind of mixture. And he's actually, that guy's like white, Apache, and like Mexican, right?
I don't even know.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
The actor that played Miklo.
Yeah.
I don't know, but all I know is every kid that's half Chicano, half white has been cursed with being called Miklo by everybody in his family and his friends.
El Miklo.
Hey, Miklo. Yeah. God damn it.
I've been called Miklo. I've been called Güero. I've been called Indio. those are all my nicknames going down the list.
But I have to quibble a little bit with what you were saying at the beginning in terms of Chicanos only get recognized during Hispanic Heritage Month.
Yeah.
Because, like, is it really about us now? I mean, because it's really not. I mean, it's about Spain. It's about all these other places.
Oh,
but
I
it's
didn't
not
mean.
about,
Oh, I
it's
didn't
not
mean it
about
like.
us. It's
Yeah,
not,
I
it's
didn't
not
mean
even
it like
about
that was a good
Chicanos.
thing. I didn't mean that that was a complaint.
Oh, okay.
Because like that's the only opportunity. Like
But even
yeah.
though it's seen as an opportunity for us, like
Yeah.
it's really not, because
Yeah.
they don't really want to hear the Chicano experience.
Well,
Yeah, they don't.
we do
Right?
have
100%.
August,
Yeah.
which, as you all know, is
Exactly.
Chicano Heritage
That's where I was
Month.
going with it. Thank you. That's exactly right. We
But
have
the
our
thing
own
is,
month
like
now.
the academia is not having like so we have this big, well-funded reading series in August for Chicano Heritage Month. It just like I'd go to that in a heartbeat. And I
Gotta
always
make it
consider
happen.
about banning Hispanic heritage, doing all that stuff. And I would like to, if everybody wants to like invest more into like Chicano Heritage Month, I'm down for it. But it's just like I don't hear anything, as a writer. This is my first book coming out, but I got stuff published on magazines, anthologies, whatnot.
Yeah, I was
don't hear
looking at
anything-
your work, man. It's really impressive.
Oh yeah, it should be more out there. But like I don't hear anything all year. It's not like come out and until this month rolls around.
Well, next time they reach out to you, tell them, I'm Chicano year round, right? like, you can call me anytime.
12 months out of the year, baby.
You don't have to wait until this fake holiday month or whatever you want to call it.
So, as a Chicano author, and you get, probably not taken as seriously, or you're not given as much exposure as other authors. And it wasn't that long ago. It was like, damn, how long? Like pre-COVID, maybe 4 years ago, when American Dirt. Do you remember that whole fucking dust up over that stupid ass book? I mean, this woman's book, and for people that don't know, American Dirt was a story of like, Mexican migrants, quote unquote migrants, and the Mexican experience in the United States. But it was written by a white woman, and she just made so much goddamn money off of this thing. Right. She was featured on Oprah.
She's got another book coming too, doesn't she?
Yeah,
another
Puerto Rican experience
about her Puerto Rican experience.
She's hopping around. Her next one's going to be about the Cuban experience. I mean,
she's going to be the world's foremost. See, Latinxers, she's sucking up all your.
That's right.
I always said there only could be one.
Sunlight,
there only could be one like brown writer that they actually support, but the mainstream. I mean, there's only like one, and she took up that space. Yeah, that if you're asking me about American Dirt, it did set me off pretty bad because I've been an editor, and I know a lot of great writers, and to think that you can't even break into mainstream, right? And a lot of stuff I do is actually like far as the press I'm trying to start, my East Popping Press, Palabras del Pueblo. Well, our main thing is like to reconnect our writers with our community, right? Because as a writer, the thing I heard around this book quite a lot is I'm being published by Flower Song Press, which isn't a mainstream like gringo press, right? I've heard from agents, editors, everything, and they're being very paternalistic. They say basically brown people don't read. That's what we had. Me and my friends made a reading series for a while called "Brown People Don't Read" because we all heard about it. All the editors and agents were telling us that you have no audience, that your community doesn't support you. And in a lot of ways, it's true. They don't always support. They're biting Harry. They do read, but they buy Harry Potter. They buy things like they read stuff like that.
Right.
So, but I think it might be changing. We're kind of going through a renaissance. There's more small presses. There's more books. There's more small Chicano presses more than ever. But but I think our culture is spinning its wheels for quite some time now because conditions haven't changed for one. So like you're going to get some of the same stories, but at the same time we're not writing for each other. We're writing for somebody white on the East Coast to like it enough, to be familiar enough with it, but also not be indicted enough by it. They feel like something's wrong. Obviously, there's something wrong with exploitation, dehumanization, and the people who benefit off it don't like one of their benefits is fragility, comfort, all those kind of things we all know, right? So they don't want to hear it. Yeah.
So in a sense, what I'm hearing is that there's a parallel here with Hunt and this woman with American Dirt, because it's a white lady
Yeah.
who is writing about the brown experience. And so other white people can relate to it because it's
Yeah.
a white person that is kind of speaking their language and describing this culture to them in a way that they can digest it.
That's also one of the main problems I would say for a lot of like California, like people writing about Californios, right? And people, and to a lesser extent, like New Mexicans, right? Because my grandfather's side's from there, and I watch, but there's more New Mexican writers, but like everyone, particularly white people and non-Mexicans, feel very entitled to write about the California, like what Californios are, even Mexicans of California are. And I can't believe it, and like, 'cause I learned the history, learned what's going on, and like it's everyone's hobby, that's we're all made into their hobbies.
So let me ask you this. How much of this is coming from Chicano authors not being promoted properly? That like the whole reason like Chicanos aren't reading Chicano authors or like supporting Chicano authors. How much of it is coming from just a general lack of awareness that these books even exist? And how much of it is coming from a lack of distribution networks available, like bookstores, right? Like, goddamn, there's hardly any bookstores anymore. Like Amazon killed everything. And there's the third part, which, I hate to admit, but it is part of it, is we tend like to not support our own in terms of like just coming out of jealousy. Like, fucking Duncan thinks he's all fucking bad now because he wrote a book. Fuck that dude.
Academic hobbyists.
So there's like this, this internalized colonization, this self-hate that a lot of us carry, this misplaced antagonism that we have towards each other that expresses itself as, well, I'm just not going to support that dude.
Crabs in the bucket.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So I would say it's all these things, and it's hard to say exactly because there's one of the biggest things we're missing as a community, I would say, is a Chicano education. A lot of people don't know their own history.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know their own family history. They don't know their own literature. They don't, and then you think about the media. I lose my mind, right? Because things set in LA, it's like you have to, if you guys have been to LA, there's a bunch of Mexicans in LA. It's like one of the largest, obviously, yeah. And
just a tad bit.
It's like there's not even in the back, not a main character, not even in the background, right? And it's not that they're not just going to a Mexican neighborhood, quote unquote, but they're like just not. They're literally erasing.
Mm-hmm.
They're erasing us from where we're one of the biggest groups, right? I would say. So we don't see ourselves. We lack cohesion. We lack education in a large way. A lot of people, they get to college and they read alternative a little bit stuff, and then they get a little more into it. But the other thing is, I have to say, I don't remember this dude's name in grad school, but I remember something he told me was kind of telling. I was taking a class by a really great professor on African American literature, right? I think it was African American, might have been speculative fiction, right? It was a great class, and so we're here in a writing workshop, and they're saying, like, talk to your guy, the guy next to you, to see what you guys are reading lately, right? And talk and what you like to, and who are your favorite authors. So he tells me that he read a Russian. He really likes Chekhov, and he really likes Chaucer. And so I'm like, well, I've been in this, I tell him I've been in this African American literature class. I've been reading this and this lately, and he tells me, wow, I just don't have any, like, I would read stuff like that, but I don't have, what was it, like any margin of understanding for that. And I kind of sat there looking at him. So do you speak Russian? He goes, oh no. I mean, all right. So I said, so you feel more familiar with a 19th century doctor in Russia who wrote a different language.
Yeah. You'll read War and Peace, but
13th century clerk who wrote in Old English than you do with someone writing in English in this country in your own time. And so it's like, and they all would tell me, if I took one class with like Mexican women writers, unfortunately the U.S. Latino writer, whoever it was, right? oh, I wish I spoke Spanish. I'm like, well, my Spanish is kind of crap, but at the same time, none of these writers writing Spanish, you know. And I was in I won't name names. All right. I was someplace. I asked them, I was around some people who are reviewers, and I asked them, could you name me? And after they showed no interest in some of the stuff, the Chicano speculative fiction writers I was talking about, I asked them, could you name any Chicano writer whatsoever to me? None of them, like 5 of them. None of them could name one Chicano author.
Damn.
Yeah.
Not even like Rudy Anaya.
No.
Or
Nettles.
Those are 2. Those are like Gibby. Those are like, I thought that easy, right? No. Yeah. And so it's like it's part of for me, it's part of that binary, right? There's a black-white binary and other.
Right.
And this country promotes this idea. We're the other, right?
We are the most othered, and we're natives.
Yeah. We're the other right under your feet.
Yeah. We're the others who were here before all the others got here.
We're so othered that we're beyond the othering. Man,
beyond
that's
othering
terrible.
Collection of Chicano writing.
I mean, it's a sad reality. One of the things that I've discussed before, maybe I've brought it up on the show, but I know I've talked about it before with some of my colleagues and like at conferences, and the issue with, like, as a historian, like I teach Mexican American history, and I can never get it to it's able to make online most of the time, but in person I have trouble sometimes to get it to make in person at my campus. And so our community college has 7 campuses across the city of Dallas, right? And so I'm able to gather students, but not only from Dallas College, but also from like around the state. So I get students from UT Austin, from Texas State, who take my class because it's online and it's cheaper at a community college than taking it, at their home school. And so they take it for credit or what have you. And so one of the things that I've noticed, right, in my in-person classes is that I get students who are, whose parents immigrated here in the 90s or what have you, late 80s, early 90s. And so they have no frame of reference when it comes to like our collective history as Chicanos in this country. And a lot of times they see the history of the people that came before them as not being their history because, their family is immigrant. And so their connection is still to Mexico. And so when they think of their ancestors and then when they think of their stories, they're not thinking of, Chicano history in the U.S. pre-1990. They're thinking of like the people from back home, from their community, from their pueblos. And so that's part of the disconnect that we have, going back to what you were saying about the history and the lack of the historical knowledge and the continuity that we should have as a community, as opposed to, for instance, African Americans. They have that long durée, that history that they can tap into, and even including like recent African immigrants. There's still kind of a way for them to sort of be part of that broader collective history because it's very strong and it's still tied to the origins, to their ancestors. And for us, with every new wave of immigration that has come, it's like a reset button. And everything that came before is like, oh, that's not us. That's other people. That doesn't concern me. So that's kind of part of the problem as well, I see.
Yeah, it's but first I wanted to mention I went to Richland College as well. That's in Dallas.
That's part of Dallas College. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's where I took some of my Mexican American history courses.
I wish I would have taken it then.
Yeah.
But yeah, I kind of call it the Mexipolo syndrome. Some people are thinking that they're the first, like they may be first or second generation, but they're like the first Mexican to ever set upon this land, and it's been an experience for, thousands of years, you want to be honest, because people crossed back and forth all around. And then on top of that, like the U.S. has come here as far as like dealing with this kind of idiom has been for like, 160, 70, whatever years it has been. But it's at the same time, a lot of people that come from other parts of Mexico, you might say, are like, they have a sense of the state they're from, right? And they're very much proud of being from Jalisco or, wherever. And, but now they're here and it's like, I either seen it like, oh, they're not the real Mexicans here. I'm like, what are you talking about? Right. Or it's like this used to be Mexico. I'm like, yeah, and it has a history. How come we don't want to, why do you don't want to know it?
Exactly.
And the fourth thing is that it's all connected. Like the revolution caused a lot of people to come across here. A lot of them hid out here during the revolution. Californios some Californios had enough and went to cross the border. Some Tejanos had enough and they had to run across the border. And so there's always been this porous nature and that has to do with politics as well. And so we're connected. We're all, I mean, ultimately Californios that, the parts that aren't like the locals came from Sonora, from the tribe from Baja California and Mexico City. Right. And so we're connected from the, everybody, from the, what do you call it? They always talk about, the people who were like the most desperate of Sonora came to California. So also it makes it the whole kind of prancing Spanish lord of California a little funny, because the most desperate people showed up to California like that. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so I think, but we're pretty interconnected, and that's what that doesn't always make sense to me. Like far as like,
well, I mean, so even just recently at the conference that I spoke at yesterday, the person who happens to be the new director, he's been there for a couple of years, of the Office of DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, because they still have this is a private institution, a private four-year college, so it doesn't have to abide by the new Texas rules where that's kind of forbidden.
Yeah, you're allowed to give a shit about that stuff.
Exactly. And so they still have their office there, and they can run it as they see fit. And so through this office, they were able to host a bunch of native speakers from around the country, locally, and celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day. But the director, I was talking to him, and it turns out that he's I'm not sure where he's originally from, but he was in Omaha for over 20 something years. And when he said that, I said, "Oh, that's interesting. I wanted to ask you something, because I've been looking online for this place that I remember one time when I drove through Omaha on my way north back in the late 90s. I remember distinctly on Interstate 35, to the right-hand side, as you were entering Omaha, there was this place called the Chicano Cultural Center."
Oh, wow.
And his eyes lit up and like, I used to be on the board for the Chicano Cultural Center. I'm like, wow, that's interesting. And I asked him, what happened to it? Because I can't find it. I've been looking for it online, see if there's any information, because I've always been curious about it. He's like, well, we had to change the name. What do you mean you had to change the name? Yeah, we had to change it to Latino Cultural Center or something. And I said, why? He's like, because all the old veteranos had kind of graduated out of that place. It was a place of assistance where people could go for health resources and education and things like that. And so it was getting to the point where they couldn't sustain it anymore because they weren't getting a lot of traffic. And all the new people that were coming in, all the immigrants that were coming in, didn't have that connection because they didn't even know what Chicano meant. They're like, what is the Chicano stuff, right? And so he said we had to change the name. And once we changed the name and we started promoting it as a Latino Cultural Center, we started getting more foot traffic again, right? So just right there, that distinction that he made, right? Like that point that he was trying to make is like the Chicano history, the Chicano people, there's kind of a disconnect that's going on, right? Between the people who have immigrated recently in the last 30, 40 years, whatever, and the people that came before. And that, to me, that just kind of drove the point home. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
If I'm honest, I've had pushback for every Chicano project I've tried to organize from people. From like every people. I'm dead serious. Every people, because I helped put out the first Chicano sci-fi anthology.
Right.
Which is great, by the way.
It is. Love it.
Oh, thank you. And working on the next one, which I have high hopes for. It's going to come out next year. Through Ryder Rose's, I should say, right? It's a certain small press, right? But it's called Chicano Futurism. Maybe Chicano Futurism. Now we're talking about the title a bit, but it's going to be nonfiction, fiction, art, and comics and poetry about the future of raza, be like a raza futurology, but when it comes to Chicanos.
Hell yeah.
I'm very excited about it because I think what we need is imagination again. We need because we lost everything else, and now we need to gain our ideas about community going into the future.
It's been diluted through the Latino, Latinx identity. Yeah.
But people have said, so why don't you stop what you're doing and get with us, this group? Why don't? Obviously you're being exclusive or somehow crypto racist and not letting X group in. And I'm thinking this is a little bit strange because Chicano is a very wide identity, right? And we all have different different nations behind us to make up this, right? And it's supposed to be a decolonial identity. I thought everyone would be down with that, but
Right.
unfortunately, it's just not true. And I shot down some people. I don't want to name the group, but let's call them Group X.
Let's
And I
call 'em
said,
Group
so
Chafa. How about that?
Group what?
Chafa.
Chafa. Okay, Group Chafa. I said, so when I get an invite for the next Group Chafa anthology, I'll give you the invite for the next Chicano anthology I organize, you know?
Yeah.
Because it's like everyone deserves a space, but apparently we don't. That's why
Apparently,
everyone
yeah, we
feels
don't.
entitled to it.
There's this weird anti-Chicano freaking sensibility, going around, and it comes from all these Latins. Like it's this this dynamic between the two of us, and like whatever. I'll never call myself Latin, so I don't really give a shit.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of blows my mind, and I think we could be doing more things if people would be behind it. It's just like the part that really is strange is that they think if we get together, if we discuss things in the community or have our own like literary and cultural spaces, that means somehow we can't connect with other people, or
Yeah.
we
Or
can't
all the
do things
Latins
with
are
other
saying,
people.
well, technically, if you get that many Chicanos together, that's a gang.
If they say that to me, I'm gonna say you're right.
And we're coming for you.
All right, so I want to thank you, Scott Russell Duncan.
Duncan.
The book is Old California Strikes Back. It is a great book. I'm really enjoying reading it. It's truly original, and it's a fantastic piece of Chicano literature. When does that book come out?
October 15th.
October 15th. And where can people purchase it?
You should ask for it at your local bookstore, but you could also get it on the Flower Song Press site, and it should be on all the online platforms like Amazon and whatnot.
And where can people look you up? Do you have a website? Do you have an Instagram?
I'm on Instagram. It's at Scott Russell Duncan Fernandez. And my website is www.scottrussellDuncan.com. It's 2 S's and 2 L's.
Mhm.
Excellent. And for all of our premium subscribers, we're going to pick up the rest of this conversation on the bonus segment. So if you're a premium subscriber, we'll see you on the other side. If you are not a premium subscriber, please consider doing so. Go to talesfromaslantes.com and click Go Premium for $5 a month. You get bonus episodes, ad-free episodes, access to the Discord server, and now bonus content to each episode. So we'll see you on the other side.
And remember, folks, the truth is like medicine. Doesn't always taste good, but it's always good for you.
Timoitase.
Cancan.
Thank you for listening to Tales from Atlantis, a project of the Chimali Institute of Mesoamerican Arts. If you enjoy the show, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter. You can do this by visiting talesfromaslantes.com and clicking Support the Podcast. Your continued support will help keep the podcast ad-free and independent. Until next time, Timoitase.